Hello and welcome to The Rightest Leftist with Nathan Ogilvie, the podcast for the politically homeless. This is going to be a follow-up to the Victorian Childcare scandal video I did a few months ago. So it's not a fun topic and it's potentially triggering, so here's a warning up front. Let's just do a summary of the case and get straight into it. So, former childcare worker Joshua Dale Brown, age 26, was charged with more than 70 offences, including sexual assault involving infants and toddlers at several centres in Melbourne. He worked across at least 20 to 23 childcare centres in Victoria between January 2017 and May 2025. The scandal prompted the Victorian government to launch a rapid review into the early childhood education and care system and the regulation, and they found major regulatory gaps. They announced immediate reforms, a couple of things including banning personal smartphones from childcare centres and issuing fines if people don't comply with that, strengthening background checks around working with children checks, and creating a dedicated worker register. This case has triggered national scrutiny of the childcare regulation frameworks, and there's calls for a united national register of childcare workers and improved monitoring across states. I just want to say before I get into the video that as a parent with a 2-year-old daughter who goes to childcare centre, I'm absolutely disgusted with the actions of this individual and also all the other abuses that have gone on in the system. There's videos of people slapping children, spitting on children, pulling children. We do have an image of a child being abused in this video. I will warn you before I show it. But it's just the Wild West and it's absolutely disgusting. And the government should be ashamed, should be absolutely ashamed of how it got this far. Now, you might be a Labor government defender. Thank you for watching. But you just can't defend this and how slow they've been. This particular case was since 2017, all through their term of government. It's a massive failure, and the rapid review that was taken in and completed in August, so by Jay Weatherill and Pam White, who completed this rapid review ordered by the government. It was good that this was done, but when you start to see some of the things they recommend, asking why were these things not already in place? And now it's been 2 months because this was released mid-August and it's now recording this at the end of October. We need to be on the government's back about this. If you're a parent or if you grandparent, have nephews and nieces, or just know children, or just care about children in general and community safety, because for my liberal friends who are all about community safety and youth crime and wanting to keep the community safe, you should care about this, and we should all care about this just as humans. And the government should not just they don't want to talk about it. They're trying to talk about anything else, but we can't let them get away with this. So the review provided 22 recommendations in basically 3 parts. So the first part was system responsibility, and that was just the usual, making sure the safety and rights of children are paramount, which hasn't been the case, rethinking the whole system and a 10-year reform plan. We need action now, but at least they're talking about the future, and a National Early Childhood Reform Commission. And so, to be fair, yes, there is the federal government, which is also Labor at the moment, are responsible for a lot of this as well. It's a mess from top to bottom. The part 2 is keeping the predators out. So that's establishing that register of workers. Why there hasn't been that register already, I didn't even know that there wasn't one, which is unbelievable. Best practice in recruitment and induction standards. Now, I do want to say this too. A lot of caveats I have to put in here, especially if people just watch the thumbnail and don't actually watch the video. If you're commenting on that, you need to watch this whole video first. I don't necessarily directly blame the workers. I know they're under a lot of pressure. They're underpaid, overworked. So a lot of these best practice things, from what I know in the real world of how it really works out there, these things, they need to be properly funded and invested in. And we're going to find as we go through this that they haven't been. And just a whole list of things. You can read that list on your own. I encourage you to at least read the summary of the review, because so many things is part 3 as well, detecting and excluding the predators from the system, that the system is completely not fit for purpose for doing that. And we're essentially feeding our children to the wolves at this point. So now Labor and Jacinta Allen, who I close to holding personally responsible as a state premier, but her statement will at least give her the chance to, from her point of view. So they've broken families' trust, and they've broken my trust as premier, as a mum. So she's targeting and blaming the childcare centres. And then you can see here that the state Victorian Labor government is accepting and implementing all of the recommendations. They're immediately suspending working with children checks. They had to change the law so that could be done. So that wasn't even done. And we've now found out a few workers were still working that had been convicted of a crime or something, and still had their working with children checks, calling on the federal government to help, which I guess in some ways is fair, but the way how it was allowed to get this far is just baffling. And I don't look. She says as a mum, and I say as a father, how this happened. They need to just keep following up on this, because as you'll see, they're trying to talk about everything else, from the infrastructure to the suburban rail, the Westgate Tunnel, the metro tunnel, and all those infrastructure projects. Sure, okay, I'm going to do a video in future of some of the good that they've done and have a balanced view. But this is not a winning issue for them. If they want to come into the election next year and show that they actually care about everyday Aussies and children, they need to do much, much more. And just for the follow-up on what happened with that specific case. So this is Tim Hickey, who's a CEO of the Affinity Education Group, where this predator was allowed to do this to children. There is an image there of a child being dragged across the floor. Quite a distressing image. And yes, they do. A lot of centres do have CCTV. A lot of them don't. And I think that's one of the things they're changing. So there will be more monitoring. But look, this worker did that with the CCTV there. It looks like the room's empty, and there wasn't 2 workers, as there is supposed to be, not limiting 1 worker per child. But this guy is on a salary of $625,000, and his bonus was considered about 50% of that. So just under $1 million salary if he met his bonuses, so $950,000, somewhere around that range. He's ended up resigning, but in this inquiry that they undertook, Affinity Education Group between 2021 and 2024 was slapped with 1,700 regulatory breaches. And basically none of them went any further than just the initial investigation. So these regulators have basically no teeth or no follow-up in actually holding these centres accountable, these for-profit, because Affinity Education Group is owned by a bigger company that is basically like venture capital. So it has a share price. And he, as a CEO, like I'm talking about a lot of CEOs, just cares about that line going up. What's the share price? How can we save money? How can we cut costs? And his quote there, which is laughable, I don't work for private equity. I work for Affinity. My job is to sustain profitability in our centres so that we can reinvest back in our educators, back into centres. Now, I'm going to see if I can talk to some of these educators, but what do you think the percentage chance is that any of those educators received a bonus or this reinvestment back, with their salaries basically minimum wage, and at this stage, some of them under $30 an hour, which for an adult working full time is really barely enough to sustain feeding your family. And luckily he resigned. At least this particular CEO at least can experience some shame. So what do we do? Because I don't want to, if you're mistaking this as an ad for the Liberal Party, because I think the Labor Party was so terrible and failed on this, let's just remember why I think the Liberal Party would be even worse. Because first of all, over the last, since 2018, so what's that, like 7 years, they've had this many leaders. So we had Matthew Guy, then we went to Michael O'Brien, then we went back to Matthew Guy, who lost the election for them. Then we went to John Pizzuto after Matthew Guy lost the election, and now I think he's $1 million in debt, formally sued by a staffer that the Liberal Party is going to try and bail him out. Now we're with Brad Batten. I'm trying to get in the shot here. Then we got Brad Batten, who apparently is now there's going to be a leadership spill, and we're going to go to Jess Wilson, apparently. So this Liberal state government is, if they get back, we're even worse, because you think that they would hold childcare centres accountable and big businesses. Absolutely not. They would make the situation so much worse. And they talk so much, they're focusing so much on crime in Victoria, but what about these crimes against innocent children who did not deserve it at all? And where's their voice? Because I don't see any solutions from them whatsoever. And again, they're not really even talking about it either. They're talking about the machete crime and all the violent and youth crime, which we definitely need to address. And I'm going to do a whole series of videos on that. But there'd be no worse option than the Labor Party getting in than the Liberals. And so if you ask me, why do I feel politically homeless, or why is this my show about political homelessness, is because this is how I feel. This is Jacinta Allen and Anthony Albanese, the leaders of the Victorian and Australian Labor Party. And in the debate, Anthony Albanese, our Prime Minister, they asked him what's his proudest achievement as Prime Minister. And he said childcare and trying to bring in universal free childcare to all parents, which I think is a great idea. But he does not want to tie himself to this scandal that's been going on in Victoria, and the Labor Party is going silent on it. And so for some of my friends who are Labor voters and supporters, and we're being told that this is the party for everyday Aussies, Friendly Geordie's alleged Labor shill, but at least, clearly puts his bias out there in terms of Labor. How is this, you sort of say, well, you vote for the party that has the best policies. What can we do about this? Because as a parent, we need so much more action to fix this broken system. And Labor going now essentially silent on it. Like, okay, we've made a few changes and then it's just going to go back to the status quo. Well, it's not good enough. And so as a parent or anybody that cares about children, this is where action can come in, and you can write to your local member. Because if they get enough people saying, I will not vote for you if you do not help support this system, that's really the only way we can get in. Because unfortunately, as I'm learning more and more as I do this, that politicians' incentives really are just re-election and polling. And if an issue doesn't get that much attention and just falls by the wayside, they're okay to just ignore it and move on. And myself, that's something that I can't do. So I'm going to be following and watching this Victorian Labor government closely, because we're almost getting close to a year out from the election, and I couldn't stomach voting for a party that's going to allow this to happen to our children. So continue to join me in discussing these issues. Tell me what issues are important to you, and I will consider doing a video on them. My name's Nathan Ogilvie. This is The Rightest Leftist, the podcast for the politically homeless, and we'll talk again very soon.